Oh, hello there. That's not Addison Hayes on the DLF YouTube channel. What madness is this? Hello, my name is Peter Howard at PA Howdy on Twitter, senior writer for DLF. And Addison reached out to me just desperate for some free time because have you seen the number of things on his shelf behind him in those videos? Can you imagine the amount of time it takes to dust that shelf? And he needs to get to that. You know, dusting is a very important part of life. And so I thought I'd try and give him a break, frankly, since he's been making daily YouTube videos for the entirety of the DLF company, I guess we'll call ourselves, and try and fill in a little bit. So, here I am. If you don't know anything about me, I'm basically a fake nerd. I blend in with the nerds and try to figure out what they're talking about, try and find useful or how useful analytics are for specifically all positions, I guess. But today I want to talk to you, since it's rookie season and rookie ADP and rookie mock season, I wanted to talk to you about our top 12 wide receivers currently in Dynasty League Football's rookie ADP. Yeah, that's what it's called. And three players specifically that I have a lot of concerns with in those top 12 at the wide receiver position. Now, typically I actually write up every year, the last 3 years, I've been writing up the production profiles of the top 12 wide receivers and highlighting positive and negative things on each of their profiles. And I thought maybe we'd do a quick YouTube version of that. So if that sounds interesting, hopefully you're still listening. And let's go look at who the top 12 are right now in Dynasty League Football's current rookie ADP and who I have a problem with, who I just hate. Not really, but we're going to take a look. So, skip on over to big screen where we can see Dynasty League Football's actual ADP, and let's talk about it. Sound good? Hello, I'm over here now. The magic of YouTube's, right? Now, did I just fit in a drop for my Dynasty Crossroads, a DLF family podcast in a DLF video? I did. It's almost like I planned it, but there you go. And so if you're not familiar with it, this is Dynasty League Football's homepage. Hopefully you're familiar with it. If you're watching our content, hopefully you know where we're from. If you want to see our rookie ADP, you just go to the Tools tab here, click on Dynasty ADP, and then click on over to the rookie section. And we're specifically interested in wide receivers, so I'll click on the wide receiver tab and zoom in a little bit because I didn't realize it would be that slow. But here are the top 12 rookies in Dynasty League Football's current ADP up to, when is it? At the end of March. So you got Jamar Chase, Rashad Bateman, Devontae Smith, Rondell Moore, Jaylen Waddle, Terrace Marshall, Taylor Wallace, Elijah the Moore. I was meant to come up with a nickname for that, and I didn't. Can you tell? Amon-Ra St. Brown, Kadarius Toney, Dimey Brown, and Seth Williams. Now, there's no such thing as a profile with just positives. We also have to read and try to understand how players made their numbers. Context is very important. But also, so are levels of production that they actually reach. Because one thing that the majority of good wide receivers for fantasy in the NFL actually share in common is having above average production. Now, good wide receivers in fantasy, in terms of having multiple top 24 PPR finishes, actually have very little in common. They're all unicorns. They're all different heights. They're all different BMIs. They share relatively little in common. Now, depending on what you're looking at, whether it's BMI, height, weight, or market share of production, for example, a certain percentage of them share similarities in common. Now, the one thing the majority of them, like all but basically two, have in common is having above average age-adjusted production. So what's that? And which of these top 12 players actually have concerning age-adjusted market share production? Well, the three players I'm most concerned with, everyone has problems. This isn't by any means you shouldn't like them if the rest of your process and the rest of their evaluations look good, and we should listen to and learn as much about these players as possible, obviously. But there are three players specifically on this list that have more concerns than others in terms of having that thing that most wide receivers who do produce top 24 seasons have in common. on their profile from college. And those three players are Jaylen Waddle, Terrace Marshall, and Kadarius Toney. So let's take a look at their production, see why they have problems, and why I don't like them as much as the other top 12 in our current ADP. So, speaking of Dynasty League tools, there's actually a college market share app. Hang on. Gotta slide it over a little bit. Alright. If you go to the Tools tab, you see this college market share app. Now, you might not know this. Weird flex, but okay. But the college market share app was actually created by Zeno, a very interesting follower on Twitter, at @thedude_Z, who made an app that looks something like this. So essentially what you can do is choose a player you're interested in looking at. In this case, it's set up to N'Keal Harry, and the seasons or the draft classes that you're actually interested in comparing him to. You can even set up the baseline in terms of where this trend line on the graph actually occurs. But it's getting a little nerdy, so let me explain basically what it does. Basically, what you're looking at is the average market share of receiving yards for players who've had multiple top 24 seasons. Those are all those little dots behind N'Keal Harry's name here. These are all the individual players at different ages, 18, 19, 20, and 21, and the market share of receiving yards, so the percentage of the team's receiving yards they had at every age they played. And so this trend line, this little black dotted line, is telling you the average at each age that the good players in fantasy actually had while they were playing in college, and this is N'Keal Harry mapped onto the average. And so if you're above the line, you have above average production in market share of receiving yards, and if you're below the line, you have below average market share of receiving yards. Now, obviously, not every player has above average production. Like, N'Keal Harry was right on the average line and then above the average line for his last 2 years, and obviously it hasn't worked out, and I left that in there mainly because I forgot his name would be the first to come up, to be honest with you. But also to point out that this, just because it's positive doesn't mean they're going to hit, but it does give us an idea of how these players compare to past prospects across this one metric that most good players have in common. And so it's an incredibly good first look at if a player was good or bad in college, good or bad in college compared to past prospects. And again, most on this list will have an overall positive look in age-adjusted market share of receiving yards or percentage of receiving yards. And so it's something I mostly want players to actually conform to, even if we do have a few apparent misses like N'Keal Harry on the list. I have a lot of N'Keal Harry shares. Start off with your losses. That's what I always say. Convince people that you know what you're talking about by pointing out what you got wrong. That's my method. What we're actually going to do is skip over to my version of it. Now, that market share app built by Zeno is actually based on my database. I know, weird flex, but it is. It's based on the database. Me and some other people put in the work to actually collect college stats going all the way back to 2000. So I actually have my own version of Zeno's app, and I like it because it's got fancy colors, basically, and also I know how to use it a little bit better, 'cause having my own means I spend less time playing with the DLF app, but you should definitely play with it, despite the lack of colors, because it's there and you don't have to make your own Excel sheet, right? And so we're going to use mine just, again, because of pretty colors, and I think it's in slightly better focus for the purposes of this YouTube video. And I'm going to pull up the 3 players that I have concerns with to show you why, and then maybe some reasons for that below average production. Alright? So I'm going to flicker over to another screen here just so you can see the graph a little better.
Hey there. Subscribe to my channel. And also press this bell icon.
Man, that's a really slow drop. I should really speed that drop up. Apologize for that. But yeah, let's look at the 3 players that I have concerns with. So the first one was Jaylen Waddle. So let me dig in here and go take Elijah Moore, just randomly dropping Devontae Smith and Elijah Moore's production profile on you here, because I happen to like both players for different reasons. But the player we're interested in is Jaylen Waddle to start off with. So here's his production. The 3 yellow dots are his production, his market share receiving yards, mapped against the market share receiving yards at each age for players who have had at least one top 24 season. And again, on that app for Xeno, you can actually set that threshold wherever you want. What type of players, past production, or, define success in another way. I like mine, but you can do you. As you can see, Jaylen Waddle was significantly below the average at every age that he played. He played at age 19, age 20, and age 21, and his final season, which was, the 2020 season, so that was a messed up season for most players last year, but you can see he was well below the average volume last year, and his best year, his 19th season, was still below the average for most players who go on to have top 24 seasons. This is a bad graph, a bad comparison to past players, and he doesn't look good. Now, you already might be saying, because hopefully you know more about Jaylen Waddle than just his name and the fact he's in his top 12, in the top 12, that there are reasons for that, and that's true. If you go back to my raw database that it's actually based on, and go look up Jaylen Waddle, where is his name? Right there. You can see he played 15 games at age 19, that year that is actually positive. It's common for good players to have a below average year. Not every year can be phenomenally above the age curve, except for Demaryius Thomas and DJ Moore and Calvin Johnson. Those players were significantly above the age curve every year they played. But most don't do that. Even Julio Jones had a below average year at some point. So it's not particularly worrying that Jaylen Waddle wasn't well above the age curve in his first year playing with Alabama with other good talent on the team, or other supposed good talent. It's yet to prove itself in the NFL, but we'll just say supposed good talent. And we can also see age 21, that lowest market share receiving yards that he played. He only played 6 games last year. So we know, and hopefully you already know from having read content on DLF, that he struggled with time on the field for a variety of different reasons, and 2020 brought about its own problems. So it's fair to write off that 2021 season. But unfortunately, at age 20, he did play 13 games. At age 19, he did play 15 games. Now, that crosses the threshold for number of games played, based on my knowledge of the history of market share receiving yards, where we should expect him to have showed up in some way positively in terms of his overall role on the team. So Jaylen Waddle's production, in terms of the volume he was able to earn on that offense, is significantly below average, even though the 2 seasons he played with significant enough opportunity to be on the field and earn that role. Now, there is a lot more context to go into his production, and I know for a fact that his on-field performance, the tape reviews, the actual skills and traits he was displaying, are a lot more positive than his overall production. Unfortunately, the one real exception we try to make with below average production in this manner is that he was playing with Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, and other good players. Unfortunately, when we look at past examples for good fantasy players that played on the same team, they don't look like Jaylen Waddle either. Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry played on the same team, and both had more than above average market share receiving yards while playing at the same time on the same team at LSU. Same with Jamar Chase, who's in this draft class, and Justin Jefferson. Both had above average age-adjusted market share receiving yards, despite playing on the same team in specific years. Now, that doesn't mean that the book on Jaylen Waddle is closed, obviously. Some positive indicators might be the likes of Chase Claypool. He had significantly actually below average production, and he was someone that was out in last year's class. But we also know that Chase Claypool came originally from Canada and played in the Canadian system before elevating, I guess it's an elevation, into the typical college football program before he went to the NFL. So there might be some lag behind him actually getting on the field. In the case of Jaylen Waddle, he clearly suffered for getting time on the field. Now, what effect that will have on his NFL development, I don't know, but it's fair to say whether it's development of his game, his skills, and his routes was stunted somewhat because of his time on the field, and because he had below average production, it's safe to say I am lower on Jaylen Waddle. That's not the entire story, but that's a concern I have, and I just wanted to drop some context in there, that some players do have below average production, and there might be ancillary reasons for it. Jaylen Waddle might fit into that kind of definition. But for right now, especially compared to the other 12 players on that list of DLS top 12 right now, I have a lot more concerns with Jaylen Waddle than most other players, or most of the fantasy players right now. Alright, so who else did I mention? Terrace Marshall, and he's someone I can't even make as many excuses as I can for Jaylen Waddle, because it didn't really have enough ancillary reasons. But Terrace Marshall's production looks like this. Actually kind of similar to Chase Claypool's. That's somewhat similar, but as you can see from all the little blue X's behind him, his production looks like no other player who's had a significant impact in fantasy, at least, in the top 12. I will say the one thing that can moderate my expectations based on their production in college is draft capital. Kelvin Benjamin, despite having a disappointing fantasy career overall, was a late breakout player who only had one good age-adjusted production year, and that was in his final year. You could say a similar thing for Terrace Marshall, but you can see he's actually still below the trend line. But first round draft capital can significantly affect my opinion on players because the NFL spends a lot more time and has a lot smarter people investigating their actual production, and also draft capital leads to opportunity, which is really the thing that all players need. Now, unfortunately for players like Jaylen Waddle, who may have had a limited college career, I actually also find that if a player has had limited time in college and gets heavy draft capital, that can also lead to a bust in fantasy. I think the story I make for myself there is that they needed more time to develop. And if you're drafted in the first round, you're expected to do more sooner in the NFL before they start getting kind of disenfranchised with you. They're disappointed, and therefore you might start to see less opportunity earlier. Now, Terrace Marshall, I don't think is projected as a first round pick. I certainly will not want him to go in the first round if it was for my NFL team, because he was a below average producer across every metric I look at. But that last season was overall positive, especially when you look at some of his other stats. His market share was kind of right on the average line. So there's a possible Kelvin Benjamin positive comp. Not that he plays like that, but he produced a role that was positive in his last season, much like Kelvin Benjamin did. But again, those are kind of the outliers in the fantasy relevant group in terms of their production. And since production is a thing that most good players for fantasy hold in common, that's kind of concerning to me. And so this graph is kind of a representation, not the whole story, but it's kind of the whole story no matter how I look at Terrace Marshall, for why I'm lower on him, especially as a top 12 wide receiver right now in DLF ADP. Alright, so the third player I mentioned was, who was it? Kadarius Toney. He's in the top 12, right? So let's pull up his graph here. Awkward pause where he reads for names. Probably should have prepared this earlier. How you doing, anyway? Awkward, I know. Did I even make his? No. Alright, let me show you how I make it live. So, Kadarius Toney, where are you? You're right there. I need to add your ages in right here. And then I need to go get your market share of receiving yards, which should be right here. Awesome. And now I have to edit it a little bit so you can actually see his markers. Excellent. They're gray. That's not fun. Let's make them orange. And let's put his name on there. This is a free tutorial in Excel. You didn't know you were tuning in for a free tutorial in Excel, but now you do. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Alright. Apparently I have empty ears. Alright, give me 1 second. Addison's going to be shaking his head at me at this point, but he's busy dusting, so we won't worry about it too much. Alright. So here's Kadarius Toney's production. You can see he has 4 full years, which again means he's kind of a late declare in terms of the number of years he plays in college before he came in. And you can see he's well below the average, even compared to Terrace Marshall in his final year playing at age 21. So, like Jaylen Waddle, however, there are actually excuses we can somewhat make for Kadarius Toney. He played quarterback in college, for example. Well, before he got to college, he was a quarterback. I do think 4 full straight years is more than enough time to actually get familiar with the position and actually maybe earn a role for himself in the receiving game for his college team at Florida in the SEC East. But he also played 2 years at age 18 and age 20 where he played less than 10 games. Now, typically if a player plays more than 8 games or more, I consider it a viable year to actually compare him to the average. But let's be particularly kind to Toney because there are some very positive opinions on him. He's definitely a dynamic athlete, as we know now. From having reviewed the tape, and we'll know from his pro day numbers as well. So let's just look at age 19 and age 20, because those are the years he actually played a significant number of games. He played 12 at age 19, he played 11 at age 21. And again, at this age 21, when he had 22% of the team's market share of receiving yards, it's important to note this is 2020. Unfortunately for this class, that's just an asterisk we have to put on all their production. All college teams were having an unusual time last year in terms of how much they played, in terms of how they were playing. And so it's fair to have some concern and even say that Kadarius Toney may have crested the age curve if 2020 hadn't been such an unusual season. I'm willing to say that. Unfortunately, that just puts us back in the Kelvin Benjamin outlier category, where most players aren't late breakouts with only one good season at a later age in terms of their overall production, in terms of their overall age-adjusted production. Kadarius Toney has, for me, the least amount of excuses to make. Now, fortunately, we can make some ancillary excuses for him. I think if we go and look him up a little bit further, we'll see he was playing a little bit more of a utility player role in college, like a Tyreek Hill was playing a utility player role. Now he also suffered significant lack of time in college because of off-field concerns we might be more than familiar with at this point. Kadarius Toney, I don't believe, has any of that on his profile, but we do know he missed time at age 18 and age 20. And at age 19 and 21, the 2 years he did play significant games, those are the 2 years he earned a significantly larger role for himself on that team. Again, my main problem with him isn't that there aren't reasons behind this production. It's just that most players the thing that most players who have fantasy relevant seasons have in common is that they produced over or an exaggerated amount compared to most players for the overview of their careers once you adjust by age, which is essentially what this graph is giving us, and so his production just looks a little worse. Now, obviously, there's more to do. The NFL draft is going to happen, and again, draft capital can moderate our expectations in terms of their production. But these 3 players currently in DLF's top 12 in ADP, they have more significant concerns in terms of the roles they were able to earn for themselves, and it makes some poor comparisons to current players that we have seen be good in the NFL for fantasy purposes. And so those are the 3 players in the top 12 I have the most concern with. It's not everything. It doesn't mean they can't be good. It just means that they compare worse compared to the other players in the top 12 across one thing we know most players who have fantasy relevant seasons actually have in common. You think I'd leave you? No. I did want to say thank you for checking out the video. Thank you for allowing me to come on the DLF channel and give Addison Hayes a break. I do hope that Shelf is looking spick and span the next time I see him. And also thanks for Addison Hayes. He's really been holding down this channel all by himself. And if you haven't yet, make sure you go check out one of his videos and give him a thumbs up, give him a like, give him something. Because at this point, as well as not being able to dust his shelf, I don't think he's slept in weeks. So hopefully this gave him a slight break. And thank you all for checking out. I hope you find it somewhat interesting. Maybe. Hopefully. Anyway, appreciate it. And see you all next time. Hopefully I'm invited back. Who knows? Probably not. See you later. Bye.